Don't tell me where I can vacation, okay, Mr. President? Editors note the opinions in this article are the author's, as published by our content partner, and do not necessarily represent the views of MSN or Microsoft. Dear Mr. President, may I have a word with you regarding vacations? I know you enjoy a little respite from time to time. You, and by time to time, I mean that you've played golf since becoming president. I don't blame you. I have no say over where you go on vacation, or what you do for R&R. You can head to Mar-a-Lago every weekend if you choose. I'll even help pay. So we're in agreement then, yes? I'll continue to hear now about my vacation. You've on travel to. The embargo is outdated and should be lifted, your predecessor, who shall not be named, said in 2016. He began chipping. So Mr. President, let me run an idea by you. How about I don't? Let me be clear, I have no interest in supporting Cuba's military or its involvement in Venezuela or support of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. I am happy to have. Most importantly, the thaw in the embargo gave Americans a way to directly help the people of Cuba. They could stay in peace. It was a system that seemed to be working well. According to they, people-to-people visits are the most common way U.S. tourists and Cuban Americans visit the Caribbean island. During that brief window when people-to-people travel was allowed, multiple cruise lines, including Royal Caribbean, Norwegian, and Carnival, began offering trips to Cuba. The companies as a result, more than 800,000 U.S. residents who were planning to visit the island have seen their itineraries cancelled or changed to other Caribbean islands. I am wondering how. Similarly, I suspect the airlines that began offering direct flights to Cuba after your predecessor, who shall not be named, lifted portions of the outdated embargo, will take a financial hit as well. With fewer people, a quick reminder: U.S. residents headed to Cuba are not going with the intention of lining the Cuban military's pockets with money. What was happening? What do you say, Mr. President? How about letting people? Before I finish, let me remind you that maybe not on big Cuba is no Mar-a-Lago. It doesn't cost. Christopher Muther can be reached at. Follow him on Twitter.
Raindrop, drop top smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park, pot.